Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another ESET East Africa webinar series. Today, we will be covering not a particular product per se, but rather the ESET Consumer V10 launch. So there's obviously a couple of changes that have happened with the product naming, as well as a few new features that have been released and a few licensing changes. So we'll be covering those as we go along. As always, if you have any questions during the course of today's webinar, please send them through on the Q&A section. We will aim at answering those questions towards the end of today's session. So to kick right off, firstly on the product name changes. So as per the graphic being displayed to you at the moment, NOD32 stays the same. Smart security is turning into internet security. Multi-device security remains the same, but the most important addition is that there's now the Smart Security Premium package, which is the new introduction, and it also comes with all of the most advanced features available on our consumer range. A few things around internet security. So it replaces ESET Smart Security as the internet security product. And the reason for that is plentiful. Mainly it's around the fact that most other providers on the market have some type of internet security product. So obviously, in order to ensure that we are found in terms of search engine results and that people are looking for the right product, ESET have decided globally to rather make a normal traditional endpoint antivirus product as per usual in the form of NOD32, and then an internet security package with a middle or advanced level of protection. The most important change, however, is the usual smart security product had an anti-theft component. That is now falling away out of the internet security product, and it is now only available on the new Smart Security Premium. It is, however, important to note that any existing licenses of Smart Security can still be renewed or enlarged, and that any new orders and everything else around Smart Security will obviously be applicable for the V10 version. So that's the gist of internet security. It's just important to make that very clear distinction that smart security has dropped away and is now replaced with internet security, and that more importantly, the anti-theft component is no longer available in that particular product. It is now only available on the top-end solution in the form of Smart Security Premium. So the other reason is obviously we want to keep the Smart Security name in the form of our new premium product. And the reason is because if we look at our global search results, the name Smart Security is still synonymous with ESET. So we want to ensure that that brand is kept alive and that people still know that it still does exist. And it now is obviously moved into a premium line competing with our competitors. Next, in terms of the multi-device security, there have been a couple of adjustments that have been made with the licensing. Traditionally, it was an idea that you had X number of computers and X number of mobile devices. That concept is now falling away. You simply choose the number of devices that you have in total and get the appropriate bundles so that you can chop and choose with a bit more freedom. And it's important to note that these are available as two-year options as well. So in terms of migrations, 1+1 is now essentially a 3-user, our 3+3 is now a 5-user, and our 5+5 is now a 7-user. So that's as large as those go. Obviously, you can buy multiple packs if needed. And then in terms of some of the new features that have been released, this is the first new feature that is actually available across the board on all ESET consumer products. So that's on NOD32 as well as Internet Security as well as the new Smart Security Premium. And the reason for this is obviously with the advent of ransomware and the fact that JavaScript is executed natively by any Windows operating system. So obviously many sites run some form of JavaScript as part of their code. So that's obviously a massive attack area in the form of browser-based attacks. You also end up with the scenario that unfortunately PowerShell is tied to a great deal, in fact, more than a third of all known cyber attacks on Windows machines. So the idea behind the ESET script-based attack protection is essentially that if there's any malicious scripts that try to execute in the form of JavaScript or something like PowerShell, then ESET will monitor for that, flag that it's trying to either execute or that it has been found, and giving the ability to obviously block the access or ignore the threat or whatever the case may be. The next new feature is in the form of the webcam protection. It is important to note that basically the mistaken reality is that people believe if the light on your webcam is off, the webcam is not on. Unfortunately, this is not the case. In the vast majority of new webcams have their light enabled either via firmware or special software hooks. And there are ways for these to actually be bypassed. So it is possible, depending on the camera and depending on the operating system, to turn the camera on without necessarily switching the light on as well. It's also becoming more common for other apps or malware to try and hook into the webcam while it is being used by another application. Easy examples in this case comes in the form of video conferencing or Skype or whatever the case may be. And the end result is that with the webcam protection now as part of ESET products is that you're informed of anything actually trying to use your webcam, and you can decide whether or not that software should be granted access or not. So that obviously means that you and your person is being kept away from prying eyes. And the next new feature is in the form of home network protection. It is regrettably one of the most common risks out there that simple things like weak passwords or out-of-date firmware on various Internet of Things devices exist. Obviously, the huge surge in recent distributed denial of service attacks as a result of the Mirai malware, using everything from IP cameras to printers to routers, it's obviously more important than ever to ensure that these devices are properly protected. So by having the home network protection in place, you can obviously have your ESET product check your home router or access point. It'll scan for some common vulnerabilities. It'll also check that it doesn't have a weak password, something along the lines of admin, or that it doesn't report having outdated firmware. And it obviously provides you a couple of steps that you can use for remediation, maybe directing you to your relevant router vendor, for example, so that you can go to their website in order to download an update. So it also obviously, as the slide implies, shows a easy to access list of connected devices, and you can also see which devices are connected by type. So you can differentiate between smartphones and computers and that type of thing. Next, another new feature is the ESET Password Manager. And it is important that while we are publicizing this new feature, the mobile version of the Password Manager is not yet available on the Play and Apple stores. They are busy getting approved for release. So for the moment, the Password Manager in Smart Security Premium is primarily limited to Smart Security running on a Windows endpoint, and some of the other plugins and everything else will come through. The plugins for Chrome and Internet Explorer and Firefox are already available. So if you were to download a trial for Smart Security Premium in order to have a look at the product, you'll actually be able to add the necessary plugin to those browsers in order to get a feel for what it will look like. Next, the last new feature that has been introduced as part of Smart Security Premium is the ESET Secure Data feature. It's basically rudimentary encryption. So you can either create an encrypted virtual drive, so that would be synonymous with the likes of, say, a TrueCrypt container or something similar, if you're familiar with those products. It basically means that you create a file on your machine. So let's say, for example, I have a terabyte drive in my laptop. I can then go and create, say, a 10 gig file. and then mount that file similar to a disk drive or to a network share onto my machine so that I can access it. And then anything that I put in that container is encrypted, and I can obviously lock that virtual drive if I leave my machine or if I log out, and it ensures that only if you open the virtual drive with the correct password are you able to get to the data that resides within. So the actual 10 gig file remains encrypted, and as long as you mount it with the necessary credentials, you'll be able to access the data that sits inside. Then there's also the ability to create encrypted folders on removable drives, so USB drives, external drives, and that type of thing. So it basically ensures that if you are moving around data using external storage, then you'll be able to ensure that that remains encrypted as well. This particular page just shows a quick breakdown of which features are available on which relevant consumer package. So obviously, as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the script-based attack protection is the new feature that is available across the board on all products. Then the webcam and home network protection are available with the ESET Internet Security and up. As we've mentioned, the anti-theft has moved out of the past smart security, which is now internet security, and is now only available in the form of either the multi-device security or the ESET Smart Security Premium, because obviously the multi-device security can include those Smart Security Premium licenses. And then lastly, the brand new features in the form of the ESET Password Manager and ESET Secure Data is only available on the new Smart Security Premium. So that wraps up today's presentation aspect of things. Give me one moment and I'll quickly switch through so that I can actually show you the new product. So this is just a little demo machine that I quickly put into place on my laptop running in VirtualBox. I've got the new Smart Security Premium installed. Obviously, as you can see, because I practically just installed it about half an hour ago, and because this machine is freshly deployed, it's obviously showing that there are Windows updates available for this machine. So that's a nice thing that ESET will actually alert you in the case of normal Windows updates that are available, so that you can ensure that you are up to date in terms of patches and everything else. Then the other main thing that I wanted to show you is in the form of the ESET banking and payment protection. This is not a new feature. It is something that has existed in our Smart Security package previously, but in case you're not familiar with it, it's basically a sandboxed browser window. So this particular instance of my browser is sandboxed from the rest of the operating system. So that basically ensures that if anything comes through in the form of malware through the browser or anything else, it's obviously extracted from my operating system, so it can't cause any havoc on the rest of my machine, because anything that happens to come through on the browser won't be able to leak through to anywhere else. And it obviously makes sure that when you're then doing some type of banking or payments, that you obviously ensure that you are doing that in a secure fashion, and that information can't leak to other malware that might actually be running on your machine in the background, unbeknownst to you as the user. Next, there is the secure data functionality. So I've basically opened it up from here. I went to Tools and I went to Secure Data. That opened up this window over here. Now what I can do is I can browse and I can go and create a file on my machine. So I'm just going to put that on my desktop for simplicity's sake for today. I'm going to say that it has a maximum capacity, in this case of 500 megabytes, which is the default value, and I say continue. I need to set a password for this drive, obviously, to ensure that it is appropriately protected. I'm just going to type in a random password. It's not the strongest password, but obviously it's just for the purposes of this illustration. And next, you get the option to decrypt automatically on this Windows account. So it basically means that as soon as this user logs in, that this drive is automatically decrypted and unlocked for use. Personally, if you are looking for a larger degree of security, I would disable this option so that you only mount and use the encrypted container when you actually need access to the information therein. That way, if someone happens to get access to your machine or something similar, or if you happen to use to leave your machine unlocked, at the very least, it means they still need to type in the relevant password in order to get at your encrypted data. But just for the simplicity's sake, I'm going to leave it as is and move on to the next step. That has now created it automatically, and that is effectively done. Now, if I open up a new window and I go over to the quick access, there's now the encrypted drive over there. I can also access it through here. And that's now obviously mounted an additional drive letter in the form of drive E. This is now a 500 meg virtual disk. And now what I can do is, if I was to create a new text file, for example, it doesn't necessarily need to contain anything, and I move it across to this virtual disk. If I now go and actually close that container, then it means that the data will be inaccessible. Obviously, in my case, it's automatically unlocked because I am logged into the machine and I left that tick box enabled. The next main area is around the password manager. So I've taken the liberty to already install the password manager plugin into Chrome as my web browser. I don't have any passwords in it at the moment, but I can at the very least show you some of the basic functionality. I set this up a moment ago and it has already automatically locked me out. So I can now type in the master password. So this is the one password that you need to remember in order to get access to all of your passwords, which are obviously now stored in the password manager vault using AES 256-bit encryption. So now that has opened up the vault, you can see that the icon has changed color, indicating that the vault is essentially unlocked. And either from this window, I can now go and add additional accounts or add specific identities. I can also import passwords from browsers or other applications. I can also add app-specific accounts and categorize them based on the relevant applications, and a couple of other things as well. So it's also maybe useful to add multiple identities. You can maybe have one identity for your personal information and another identity for work-related information or something similar. And while this is now open, if I was to visit a website that I had credentials stored for, I would basically be able to click the box. I'd be able to see the user, the web accounts, or switch identities, or obviously go to a few other settings as well, and maybe look at things like the password history, or generate a sequence of secure passwords. Because obviously, as soon as you switch to the use of a password manager, the main thing that you should do initially is go and visit every single website that you have, and replace the password with a auto-generated, highly secure password. And in doing so, you obviously get to a point where all of your passwords are of an adequate level of security. And then from that point forward, you only need to remember the one master password for your password manager. There are a couple of other options here as well. If I was to open the password manager again and go to my menu over here, there's a handful of settings that you can enforce. A few things like starting up the password manager by default, making sure that any passwords that have been copied to the clipboard are automatically deleted after a set time frame, making sure that the list of browsers are available and that the extension has been installed. So there's a handful of extensions available at the moment, but other extensions will follow in the future. You can also auto lock, so that's obviously why it had locked out while I had installed Smart Security Premium and set it up initially, and while I was preparing for today's webinar, it obviously locked me out. I can also make sure that the authorization method is through a specific device. Maybe it's through a removable device or through a Bluetooth device as well. I can also ignore specific sites, so it won't prompt to store credentials for those. I can also set up a list of trusted sites or ignored applications, and a handful of other settings as well, but I'm not going to go into those in too much detail. So that wraps up the password manager in a nutshell. And of course, the user interface of the Smart Security window kind of looks exactly the same as the previous Smart Security or Nod 32, obviously just with some slight user interface changes and some visual enhancements. But that obviously wraps it up, and you can't really get something simpler than this in terms of your endpoint protection. So if anyone has any questions, please take a moment to send them through. I haven't received anything as of yet. Obviously, with a new product launch like this, and because it is a fairly simple product, it generally doesn't involve a very lengthy webinar. So if anyone has any questions, please send them through before we wrap up today's session. Then while I wait for any questions to come through, it's also important to note that if you're not already aware, we are changing our prices substantially. So for the most part in our business line, there have been some massive price cuts put into place. This is obviously in order to ensure that we remain competitive when looking at some of the competing vendors across our regions. So that should be quite useful to you as a partner in order to win those deals. And obviously, we are still in a position to offer you specific discounts if there's a particular deal that you're trying to close. We can obviously do a couple of things in order to try and assist you in that regard. And as per usual, if you need any type of documentation, or if you want to run through additional software demos for any of our other products, or if you need any assistance at all, please feel free to get in touch. You can obviously reach us via our normal email channels or partners@esetafrica.com, or you can also just fill in the contact form on our wiki in order for us to get in touch. I don't seem to have any questions that have come through. Obviously, that's probably a good thing. Obviously, today's session is fairly straightforward. Obviously, just the introduction of a new product. For a quick recap, obviously, the most important things are the new features that have been introduced in the form of things like webcam protection, the home network protection, the password manager, and the encryption facility. But more importantly, again, that distinction that the smart security package is now falling away. It's being replaced with internet security, and that the anti-theft component is no longer available in that tier. It's only available in our new Smart Security Premium product. So that wraps up today's session. I hope it was informative. If you have any questions, please let us know, and we will certainly get in touch. But thank you all for attending, and have a good day.